there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So today's topic is all about something that I see a lot of questions about, exactly how to tackle it, what's supposed to be included, the proper etiquette, and all that fun stuff, and that is everything wedding stationery, invitations, save the date, and the do's and don'ts for both. So when it comes to wedding stationery, you kind of have two main sectors here, and that is your save the dates and your wedding invitations. So to start off, let's talk about save the dates first of all. Save the dates, if you're unfamiliar, is essentially an announcement to the people that you plan to invite to your wedding to kind of announce your engagement. A lot of people will utilize engagement photos and put them on the save the date as just kind of a happy announcement to let everybody know you're getting married and this is the date you have selected. As far as when to send these out, this is kind of up to you and dependent on what your wedding plans are. So if you're having a destination wedding where it is destination for the majority of your guests, then you're probably going to want to send your save the dates out just a little bit earlier to account for the extra travel time and just so that people are aware of your date and making sure that they are planning accordingly and not scheduling anything else over your wedding weekend. So typically 6 to 9 months is a kind of standard timeline to send out save the dates. However, if you, like I mentioned, if you're having a destination wedding or if you have a lot of guests that are traveling or if you yourself are traveling, you can go upwards to 12 months out. So again, this is really just kind of up to you and dependent on what your wedding plans are. If you're super excited, you already have your venue selected, you already have your date picked out, and you just want to send those out, there's no harm in doing that early. Save the dates are kind of just a fun way to announce your wedding and give your guests a heads up on the date. Now, as far as what actually goes on the save the dates, this is basically just a notification of the date. So really, all that you have to have planned out, all that you really have to know for save the dates is the date and ideally the location, but you don't have to put the location, the specific venue location on your save the date, just the general area. That being said, I do recommend having a venue before you send out your save the dates, just in case you end up needing to change the date because the venue that you want is already booked on the date that you originally had in your head or that you put on your save the dates, and then that might have to change. So try and have at least your venue booked for your date before sending out your save the dates. You don't need information like the time your ceremony will start. You don't need any direction information. But something that I recommend, especially if you're planning a destination wedding, is having a wedding website, and you can have this set up for the save the dates. And you can kind of just have the shell of the wedding website at this point. You don't even need all of the information, as that will kind of come into play as you get along the planning process. But alerting people that there will be a wedding website so that if they need to reference any more information, you can have direction information on there. As we get further along, you can have RSVP information and all that. That's about everything that you need on a save the date. Also, you don't need to send out save the dates. These are optional. They're great to kind of give your guests a heads up on the date, especially if you have a lot of guests coming and they're not people that you typically interact with on an everyday basis, and can kind of just give them a heads up on the date personally, but they are not necessary. If you don't want to spend the money on them, not a big deal. All right, now let's get into the actual wedding invitations. So when you're sending out your wedding invitations, there is a lot of etiquette that kind of goes into the wording, what you're supposed to have on them, what you're supposed to include, how you're supposed to address them, and this is still pretty pertinent, especially if you're having a more formal wedding. However, if you are having a little bit more of a casual wedding, you don't need to follow every single etiquette formality if that's not in line with who you guys are and the overall vibe of your wedding. So just keep that in mind as I'm kind of explaining some of these formalities. So first of all, on your wedding invitation, what you're going to include is obviously the specifics of your wedding day. So date, time, location, and all of those specifics. Again, some sort of reference to your wedding website if you have that. A way for your guests to RSVP, and any other pertinent information your guests need to know, whether that's directions, dress code, any notes on having kids or not, and all of that will go on your wedding invitation. Now, timeline-wise, wedding invitations, especially if you've looked it up, you'll probably see a wide range of timing advice and tips for when it comes to sending out your wedding invitations, and that's because there's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of ways to do this. So this is just my personal opinion and experience with my clients, and I usually say 2 months before the wedding date is when you want to send out your wedding invitations. The reason for this timing is you don't want to send them too early. I know a lot of my clients sometimes want to send them super early so that they have time to get their RSVPs in and they know exactly how many guests they're working with. So the reason you don't want to send them out too far in advance is people really suck at RSVPing, and that's something that you will, discover as you're going through this process. And the earlier that you send your invitations out, the longer time people have to lose them, to forget about them, to not have that sense of urgency to RSVP by your date. And it's better to have a smaller window of time so that your guests will, think about it a little bit more proactively. In this case, then you don't have to reach out to so many people and track them down, which you will most likely still have to do with some of your guests. That's just something that happens, so expect that. But having a shorter lead time between when your invitations are sent out and when the RSVP date is will be a little bit more proactive in getting those RSVPs. I also find that people don't like to commit to things too far in advance. So if you're getting a wedding invitation for something that's 6 months from now, it's kind of this overwhelming feeling like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to be doing 6 months from now. This is really far in advance to make plans. So some people have that mindset and will wait to the very last minute to RSVP anyways. So give yourself about 2-month window to send out the invitations. If you're having a destination wedding where pretty much everyone is going to be traveling and you need, your room blocks a little bit earlier, then you can send them out a little bit sooner, like 2.5 to 3 months. But a good rule of thumb too is to communicate with your caterer and understand when their deadline is to have your final head count in for meals, and then go about 2 to 3 weeks past that, and that will be your RSVP date. So your guests will need to RSVP by 2 to 3 weeks prior to when you need that final guest count for your caterers, so that you have extra time if you do need to reach out to individuals you haven't heard from. Okay, let's talk about wording for a second in the actual wedding invitation. So depending on where you're getting your wedding invites from, a lot of them will have templates that will kind of have this laid out for you, but if you're unsure of what exactly you're supposed to put on your wedding invitation and how to say it, here's kind of a good outline. So you obviously need some sort of opening line, whether that's "we invite you" or "together with our parents" is something that sometimes people will do and list out their parents' names, or list out your names. "Bob and Sue request your presence at our wedding." However you want to say that, have some sort of opening line. And then you will include your names. And this is where you want to decide whether you want to have your full name, first, middle, last, if you want to just have first and middle name, if you want to have just first and last name, however you want this listed on the wedding invitation, but keep it consistent. So if you're doing first, middle, last on your name, then have your partner do the same thing. If you want to just do first and middle name, then do first and middle name for your partner as well, just to keep it consistent. Next, you will have the date and time, and the formal way of doing this is actually writing everything out. So spelling the day of the week. Say it's a Saturday, you're going to write out the word Saturday, you're going to write out the word August, and you're going to write out the word 27th for 2021. Again, that is the formal way to do it. If you are having a more casual wedding, you can simply write the date as in October 2/2 2021, whatever that is going to be. And this is a good indicator to give your guests kind of an idea of the overall vibe of your wedding as well. If it's going to be more casual, then you can keep your wedding invitations casual, and that's a good indicator of what your guests can expect. You then want to include the location, and you want to include the full address. So even if it is a venue that is recognizable, so like people would understand the name of the place just by knowing the name and seeing that written down, it is also a good idea to just have the full address listed as well. This way, if people are not familiar with the place or have never been there, sometimes there's weird things with Google Maps when they plug in just the name of the venue and not the actual address, so having the address for them to reference as well is a good idea. You then want to indicate whether there is a celebration to follow, so a lot of people will say reception to follow, dinner and dancing to follow the ceremony, cocktail hour, whatever it may be. Give them an indication of what to expect after the ceremony, because technically your wedding invitation is an invitation to the ceremony. It is not an invitation to the reception, which is kind of when a lot of people think of weddings, their mind goes to the reception part, the dinner, the dancing, and all of that. However, your invitation is technically for the ceremony. Other than that, any other information you need to relay to your guests will then be listed onto the invitation. So if there's a dress code, or if you are planning to have an adult-only event and you do not want any kids, this is where you will relay that information. So sidebar, let's talk about that for a second. If you are wanting to have an adult-only wedding and not have any kids involved, there are a few ways to go about this, but you need to make sure that you are communicating to this to your guests properly. There's nothing wrong with not wanting to have kids at your wedding if that's something that you wish to have, but you need to make sure that you are communicating it and be expectant that some people may not love the idea. So a few ways to relay this is simply put adult-only event on your invitation, or over 21 event, or please join us for a adult celebration so that you can enjoy the evening kid-free. However you want to relay this, it can be as formal or informal as you'd like, whatever kind of fits your style. So you want to put this on the wedding invitation, but you also want to include it somewhere on your RSVP situation. So whether that's an actual printed RSVP card, or whether that's directing them to RSVP online, having some sort of sentence on their place to RSVP online that you are just RSVPing for yourself and your partner and not for your entire family. Another way to indicate this is on the envelope when you're addressing the envelope. So when you're addressing invites in any capacity, whether you're trying to indicate that this is an adult-only event or indicate that you are just inviting the individual and not a +1, how you address the envelope is the very first indicator of this. So if you are inviting a couple, a married couple, pretty simple here, Mr. and Mrs. so-and-so. If you're inviting somebody and they have a serious partner that you are friends with but not engaged or married, but they still are a unit and you plan to invite them, include both names on the addressed envelope. So if you are trying to relay that you are only inviting the parents and not the kids, only put the parents' names on the envelope. Don't put the Smith family, because then that will indicate that you are inviting the entire family. If this is a kid-free wedding, just indicate Bob and Sue Smith on the address on the envelope. And then one more time, it's a good idea to have something about a kid-free wedding on your wedding website. Cool. Now you know what goes on the actual wedding invitation. So let's go back to wording and what goes in the actual wedding invitation. So formality says not to include your actual wedding registry link on your wedding invitation anywhere. This is just kind of an etiquette thing, and it's not something that's going to make or break a situation. If you want to include it, no harm, no foul. However, if you are trying to follow wedding etiquette and have a more formal invitation, a way that a lot of people will do this is having an insert into your wedding invitation. So you have your piece of paper that has all of the, formal wedding invitation information, and then you would have an extra little card that maybe has your wedding website or your wedding registry information on it, separately from the actual invitation itself. Another insert idea is to have directions. If you need to give your guests proper directions to the venue or any other sort of directions, whether that is for lodging or for transportation, that is a good thing to have on an insert for your wedding invitation. And finally, you will have an insert for an RSVP card if you are doing printed RSVPs. If you are doing printed RSVP cards, make sure that they are already pre-labeled with a place for them to write in their name and a place to check yes or no, as well as the number of people they are RSVPing for. If you are not allowing +1s at your wedding for each individual guest, you'll need to make sure this is relayed onto your RSVP cards. So you might need to personalize each individual RSVP card so that there's not a spot to add an extra guest or for them to just write in any possible number of people to be bringing with them. Another thing to include if you are doing printed RSVP cards is to make sure that you have pre-addressed and pre-stamped envelopes for them to go in. The idea is that you want to make this as easy as possible for your guests to RSVP because, like I mentioned, people suck at it. So making it as easy as possible will make it a lot quicker and more efficient for them to RSVP in an orderly fashion. Another way to have RSVPs is to do it online, and that is something that I see a lot with clients these days, whether that is directly from your RSVP or from your wedding website. There's a lot of wedding websites that will offer a guest management tab where people can go on and RSVP right on their website. I find that this is the best way to get the quickest response for RSVPs. Then people aren't losing those little cards, they're not forgetting to send them out, not forgetting to go walk down to the mailbox or whatever they need to do to get that to you. They can just get on their phone, mark yes or no, put who's coming in, done. Speaking of inserts, if you are planning on having multiple inserts into your wedding invitation and it's not just going to be one standard card or piece of paper going into an envelope, you want to make sure that you're taking that to a post office and weighing it so that you can anticipate how much you're going to need for postage for each invitation. Because if there are several inserts included in a heavy cardstock, there's a good chance that it's going to be heavier than just a standard one postage stamp situation. So if you're, expecting to just put a stamp on it at home and send them out, and they're heavier than a regular postage stamp costs, then you're going to get all of those returned to you and your wedding invitations are going to get super delayed. So make sure that if you are having more than just a standard piece of paper or a standard card, that you are getting them weighed at the post office so you can know exactly what sort of postage is going to be required for those. Well, that pretty much covers everything you need to know when it comes to wedding stationery for your wedding invitations and your save the dates. If you have any additional questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we will see you next week.